Hello everyone, and welcome to a video that's a little bit different than usual, but is one that I've been wanting to do for some time now, because over the last few months I've become more and more obsessed with this little British show that you may or may not have heard of called Inside Number 9. For those of you that have heard of it and have probably seen it as well, then you know just how good it actually is. But those of you that have not heard of the show, and I'm just presuming that that's the majority of my subscribers, then let me fill you in on just how good this show is and why you should watch it, which is the main point I'm making this video, to tell you my favourite episodes of the show, and also just generally spread awareness of this show's existence so more people get to watching it. Inside Number 9 is a darkly comedic British anthology series written by Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith, who also, fun fact, pretty much star in every single episode. And that's basically all you really need to know. And if you heard that description and just kind of thought, oh great, not another anthology series, then let me just take a few minutes of your time to try and sway you into basically watching it. If you think this is going to be another Black Mirror, then yeah, I can kind of see why you'd say that. But what sets Inside Number 9 apart from Black Mirror, and take into account this is coming from someone who loves Black Mirror quite a lot, what makes Inside Number 9, in my opinion, slightly better in a certain way is that it's willing to try new things with each episode. No two episodes of Inside Number 9 are the same, because every episode is different in regards to its premise and genre. That, yeah, no two episodes feel the same, look the same, or play out the same. And you never get the same thing twice. Whereas with Black Mirror, once you've watched one episode, you kind of get the general gist of what the tone and theme of the show is all about. You know, technology's bad, so on and so forth. But with Inside Number 9, they are willing to try brand new things with each episode, and you never get the same thing twice, because for example, one episode may be a straight up comedy, another episode might be a really dark drama, and the next episode might just be a straight up horror. So without any further ado, I'm going to list off my 10 favourite episodes of Inside Number 9. I could have gone for the really obvious joke and gone for a top 9 Inside Number 9 episodes, but I'm lazy, and 10 is slightly easier to do than 9, I suppose, but I don't know. But yeah, for those who, because I know a lot of you have not seen this show, I will try and keep this list and my descriptions of the episodes as vague and as spoiler-free as possible. I will pretty much just try and say the basic premise of each one and not go really into much else. But yeah, for those of you that have actually seen the show, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What's your favourite episodes, whether you disagree or agree with my choices. And yeah, without any further ado, let's get right into it. At number 10 is Zanzibar. Out of all the episodes in Inside Number 9, this is definitely one of the funniest. I wouldn't say it is the funniest, because I think that title goes to an episode that I will talk about later in this video. But that being said, Zanzibar is definitely one of the more comedically driven ones, to say the least. And the main premise behind this episode is that it's set entirely on one floor of a hotel, and the entire thing is delivered in iambic pentameter. And for those of you that don't know what that is, basically normal people, that's Shakespeare speak. They speak as if they're in a Shakespeare play, and the whole thing kind of plays out a little bit like a Shakespeare comedy of errors kind of thing, in terms of the stuff that happens and how things progress, and the revelations that very quickly unearth as the episode plays out. And you also have other little things like the fact that when the characters talk, they do it in rhyming couplets, and they also speak directly to the camera their inner thoughts and what they are thinking and certain ideas they have. Anything that they think of, they are basically just kind of explaining it to you like a Shakespeare play would, rather than just thinking it and not really doing much else with it. And You would think a gimmick like that would get old really quickly, but like I said, it works really well for the sake of this episode. Along with some brilliant performances and just a script that gets better and better the more it goes on, this is a gem of an episode that I highly recommend, and is probably one of the better episodes for anyone starting out on this show. I mean, yeah, it is kind of an acquired taste with the approach they take, but if you're someone who's wanting to get into the show and you haven't really watched any other episodes yet, then I think this is one of the best starting points. This and my choice for number 9 as well. And number 9 is The Devil of Christmas. Now, this one is a very strange episode, but if you're a fan of really badly made 60s and 70s horror films, then I think you'll find something to appreciate here. Or just movies that are so bad they're good in general, I think you will find something to appreciate here, because the entire episode is basically this really, really shittily made 60s horror film that just kind of plays out before you, and the way they choose to present it leads into a twist towards the end that really gives the entire episode a much more darker context that you really weren't expecting. And that's one thing that I forgot to mention at the start of this video that I think I'd ought to mention here. Every episode of Inside Number 9 has some sort of a revelation or twist that changes the course of the plot's episode. 9 out of 10 times the twist doesn't happen until the end, but sometimes the twist happens very early on, and in the case of The Devil of Christmas, the twist happens literally within the last couple of minutes before the credits roll. And it really changes the entire perspective of what you've just seen. That being said, on a more laid back perspective, just the campiness and the general poorly executed way, obviously deliberately poorly executed way this episode is presented, just makes everything that bit more comedic. Something that should really be scary is actually portrayed in a really funny way. Everything from the intentionally bad acting to the bad effects to the way the episode is shot as well, because it really does look and feel like something from the 60s and not something that was shot nowadays that looks like it was edited to look old. This actually does look like it was shot in the 60s or 70s. At number 8 is Once Removed. I mean, there really isn't much I can say about this episode apart from the fact that the concept alone is bloody brilliant. It's basically Memento, but in a much more concise and to-the-point way. You are shown this thing happening right at the start of the episode, and basically the rest of the episode plays out in 10-minute increments in regards to, you see this thing happening, and then from that onwards you see the past 10 minutes play out. It's basically you're seeing a story play in reverse through every 10 minutes. And again, yeah, it does sound like it's copying Memento a little bit, but the way it's implemented here adds an extra level of intrigue that you wouldn't really get with just a bog standard episode that plays out in in an ordinary way. Because what that gimmick does is gives you a lot more mystery in regards to why certain characters are acting specific ways. And then, the next 10 minutes happens and then you can understand why they're acting that certain way. And it's a really interesting way of doing it, and I personally think it's one of the better instances of a single concept or premise working to the best of its ability, and that is one thing that this show does really well. At number 7 is Bernie Clifton's Dressing Room, and this is one that I went into thinking it would have more of a dark, comedic thriller aspect to it, but when you actually watch the episode, it's nothing like that at all. Yes, there is quite a bit of comedy to be found in the episode, but if anything, it's a really personal and actually quite touching drama that has a twist at the end that really surprised me, and I didn't think this show would ever do something along those lines. Again, if you've seen the episode, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but the way the episode wraps up really hits an emotional punch that you pretty much don't get in any other episode of this show. This is probably the one time it goes for a fully emotional impact, and it really does work. That's one thing I must also mention as well. This show does a great job of not just showcasing Steve and Reese's writing skills, but their acting as well. With each episode, you kind of get a more and more of a sense of how versatile and diverse their acting really is, because I've only really known them for certain specific roles that I've seen them in, whether it be Doctor Who or other British productions. But after watching Inside Number 9, I really have much more of an appreciation for them, not just as writers but as actors as well, because they are willing to adapt to each character in each story, and sometimes the characters that they put themselves in for these stories are wildly different to previous ones you've seen them in. For example, one episode might have them playing a really over-the-top character, but then another episode might have them playing a more nuanced and more personal character. At number 6 is A Quiet Night In, and this is the very first episode I ever watched of this show. I watched it back when it first aired, and I kind of didn't know what I was watching because I had no idea what Inside Number 9 was at the time. And I watched it with my parents, and we thought it was really, really funny. And I kind of thought the whole show was like this as well, just kind of because I really didn't know what the show was when I first saw it. But revisiting it, this is comedy gold. I mean, yeah, you kind of have to be in a certain mood to watch this episode, because the gimmick behind this one is that there is no dialogue whatsoever. It's entirely action-driven and sound effect-driven. It's basically a silent comedy movie, kind of like your Charlie Chaplin films and your Laurel and Hardy's. It plays out a lot like that, and again, the way they use that one gimmick to its extremes, whilst also making it progress the plot forward as well, really makes this episode a standout in my opinion. I know some people aren't that keen on it, but I really appreciate it for what it is able to do with such limited resources. And number 5 is The Riddle of the Sphinx. Oh boy, this one's a bit messed up. This one is a bit of a mindfuck in regards to how you find out certain things, and also how it concludes, because the basic premise for this one is that a girl goes to meet her boyfriend's university lecturer to ask him a question about these really hard and complex crosswords that he makes for the local newspaper. And from that premise onwards, things get really disturbing, really dark, really quick, and it gets kind of confusing as well. Not confusing to the point where you're like, what the fuck is going on? It goes at a steady pace where you can kind of keep track of what is happening, but it's the intricacy and just how deep this episode goes that really makes it one of the most mind-fucky episodes of Inside Number 9. And how the episode ends is both brilliant and fucked up at the same time. Again, if you've seen the episode, you know exactly what I'm on about. But yeah, this is a highlight of the entire series for me, just because it showcases Stephen Reese's writing probably at its most complex. At number 4 is The 12 Days of Christine. Again, like a lot of the episodes in Inside Number 9, this takes what seems to be a pretty straightforward premise and turns it into something a lot more heartfelt, emotional, and just really powerful. This one has one of the more powerful endings, whereas Bernie Clifton's dressing room has a straight up emotional punch at the end. This one just kind of smacks you in the face when it happens, and it honestly is just so brilliant in how they are able to tell such an expansive and genuinely quite big story and condense it in a half an hour time slot, whilst also making it concise and to the point and brilliantly well executed in every single way. At number 3 is Cold Comfort. This one is just became a favourite of mine ever since I first saw it. And the premise behind this one is that it's told entirely through the perspective of CCTV camera footage. And just that premise alone makes it brilliant, in my opinion. And the fact that you have multiple CCTV screens on screen at once really... I mean, at first, you're just kind of thinking, wow, this is a really cool premise, and it's being utilised as best as it can. But when you rewatch it, knowing what is going to happen, you start thinking about the events that happen in the episode, and you start to notice little things in the other monitors and the other CCTV footage that you may not have necessarily noticed the first time. Again, I won't get into specifics because of spoilers, obviously, but I think once you've watched this episode at least once and you go back to watch it a second time, you will definitely get that feeling of, yeah, this is a unique premise, but upon watching it a second time, you really start to pick up little hints and little clues in the other CCTV screens that you may not have necessarily noticed before that really enhance how the story plays out in the end. At number 2 is Sardines, the very first episode of Inside Number 9, and in my opinion is still the funniest episode of Inside Number 9. The premise behind this one is that this engagement party with family and friends of this couple basically all get involved in a game of sardines where everyone kind of has to basically hide in the same place, and the place they choose to hide in is a wardrobe. And this one is just really funny and really clever for the main reason that, you know, how many characters can you fit in one wardrobe? How many characters can you fit in a extremely contained setting while still having it really work? And again, one of the funniest moments in this episode comes from Reece Shearsmith's character, who is this really over-the-top gay guy. Like, not over-the-top, but he's really flamboyant, not in an annoying way, but just good enough that it adds to the comedic value of certain things, especially when certain characters come into the wardrobe that no one really likes. And yeah, the twist in this episode really blew me away. It was one of the first times I realised that twists were a recurring thing in this series, and I think the twist in Sardines works better than a lot of the twists in this show. And finally, my number 1 favourite episode of Inside Number 9, and probably the episode that a lot of people would say is their favourite as well, is Deadline. I really want to keep information on this episode as minimal as I can. All you really need to know is that it's the Inside Number 9 live episode. And judging from how previous episodes play out and how they are executed, if you go into this episode thinking it's just going to be a straightforward plot, then you'll be mistaken, because it takes pretty much a 90-degree turn within the first 10 minutes that you really need to stay on board for, because again, this is only an episode that really worked on its full potential when it was originally aired live on that day in October in 2018, you still kind of get a sense of what it was going for, watching it again later down the line, but you really had to watch it on the day it was aired to get the full, grasp of it. So, those are my top 10 favourite episodes of Inside Number 9. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it's given anyone out there who has never heard or seen this show before the encouragement to go out and watch it. As far as I'm aware, seasons 1 to 3 are on Netflix, and if you want to watch series 4, at least if you live in the UK, then you have to go to iPlayer. I don't quite know where you'd have to look if you live outside the UK. But yeah, I highly recommend as many of you watch it as possible, because it is very quickly becoming one of my favourite shows. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye.